Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Star Wars Guys YouTube channel where the Force is family. I am Master Paul, and once again, joining me as my guest tonight.
Is Golgo 13 of Golgo 13's Anime 101.
Yes, and we are at the next to last episode of our discussion of Star Wars Visions, and we are talking about Lop and Ocho. And boy, do I have some things to say about this one. So, the story for this one is it's centered around Lop, who is a anthropomorphic rabbit who escapes slavery and gets adopted by a father and his daughter. Then cut to 7 years later, where the Empire has taken control of this planet. It's a planet that they make sure to mention that really has not progressed and really has not industrialized itself in society. It stayed very feudal, stayed very in tune with nature, and so on and so forth. So, because now the Empire's here, there are some that see the Empire as a chance to finally evolve society. The daughter, Ocho, is one of those, where the father sees the Empire as eventually bringing nothing but trouble. Now, we know, having seen Star Wars, that eventually he's right, but putting yourself in this particular time period, this was a valid argument that could have been had in society. Is the Empire actually good or is the Empire bad? And unfortunately, this is a very hot argument that the father and the daughter have, with Lop getting caught in the middle. And then the episode just goes down a very heartbreaking path where the daughter is actually recruited into the Empire and, symbolically cuts herself off from the family, and then later on is shown actually fighting to the death against her father, you know, because she believes so wholeheartedly that the Empire is the way to go and that her father is just so stuck in the past, even to the point of taking his one remaining good eye. And then she's, of course, infuriated when she realizes that Lop, who I will remind was her idea to adopt Lop into the family, it was Ojo's idea. She gets mad that Lop has the family lightsaber that she thought was her birthright. But eventually it becomes a fight between Lop and Ocho, and Lop wins, momentarily drawing on the Force, and Ocho gets away to fight another day, with Lop basically the episode ending with Locke vowing that she would find Ocho and bring her back to the family. Now, having said all of that, when I first saw this episode, this was going to be my least favorite episode. Not because of Lop being in there. I could care less about the whole furry stuff. I don't like seeing things like this drive a family apart. If in a perfect world, a family, even with their political disagreements, would put that aside and stay together as a family. And to me, seeing that not happen, basically seeing the happy ending not happen, where Ocho realizes what she's doing is wrong and she comes home, the fact that that didn't happen made me mad. But since seeing it, and since admittedly talking with you about this on Twitter, Brandon, that's unfortunately not how reality works. That, yes, this, I would say that this episode is a warning, like a cautionary tale to today's society, not to let trivial things like politics and disagreements get in the way of actually being a family, because at the end of the day, at least as my dad says, family's all you got and everyone else is just strangers. But yeah, it's basically showing, yeah, the happy ending doesn't always happen.
That is very true. This particular episode, at first I didn't think I would really care for it either, but after seeing it and discussing it with my senseis, this is the most anime out of all of them. And here's what I mean by that: a story of a village or a place that's heavily has a lot of natural resources that can be used. Having someone
Hmm.
come along saying, "Hey, let us develop," and that's basically bring up your standard of living and everything else. You get some that say, "Yes, we need to have progress," and others that say, "No, we need to keep things the way they are." Well, they initially they allow the Galactic Empire to do it without them doing it by force, but of course, over the time, the Empire has a history of just doing strip mining and not caring about anything else. And of course, they use slave labor, which is where Lop comes from. She was a
Hmm.
slave. And really, when it goes right down to it, this is not the first time that there has been an anthropomorphic bunny in Star Wars. There is a precedent for that back in the early days of the comics, back before the
I
dark
believe it.
times, back before back before Disney bought it. So it's there.
I
There
believe it.
there is precedent for that. Plus, we have Wookiees.
Hmm.
Now, this one, they free this person. This Lop gets away, runs into Ocho, who instantly takes a like to her and begs her father to take her into the family. The father reluctantly agrees and does it, but if you come from a home that has parents that are divorced and get remarried, and you have other kids that are brought into the loop, even the hardest that you try, there are always going to be times when the stepchild is going to not feel fully included or treated as good as it should. And
Right.
I can tell you, as a child from a divorced home, having some stepsisters and my dad and my mom, and then me myself going through the same thing with my daughter and then my stepchildren, as hard as I try to treat them all equally and to do things that are right for all of them, it doesn't always work out that way. And
Right.
unfortunately, that's a failing of mine that I've got to work on, and I always ask for forgiveness for that. But that's basically what happens here, at least at the beginning. Once the time passes and both Lop and Ocho go from being early teens to being in their early 20s, seeing how things have happened, Ocho believes that the Empire is the only way to go, whereas her father is leading a resistance group to basically try and say, "No, we've had enough. This isn't working. Go away." And Ocho basically says, "Look, you're not going to win." And then you have Lop in the middle that's basically saying, "Hey, let's take a step back and we're family. We shouldn't be fighting like
Right.
this." And then yes, Ocho decides that instead of staying with the family, she bites her thumb, puts blood on the corners of her eyes, and cuts her hair, symbolically changing her from more or less from a child to an adult, picking her
Hmm.
sides and choosing to leave the family. When
Right.
this happens, the father realizes that he didn't treat Lop as good as he should, but because his own daughter has chosen to go a way that he cannot support, he chooses to give the family heirloom basically to Lop. And when you're talking culture and all that, passing things down from one generation to the next, when you're talking about rights of succession, um, property rights, and what happens with the oldest child typically in most of these cultures is the one that's supposed to take over the family business, inherit the family heirlooms, inherit the land. But that doesn't happen. He passes on the one relic that's been handed down from generation to generation, and that is a lightsaber. And he tells
Yes.
her that she has to accept this in order there's a certain way to accept it in order to complete the ceremony and more or less to appease their ancestors. So this one actually
Yep.
does have a little bit more ties into Taoism and Buddhism with regards to the spirituality side that in previous episodes I had said that was missing.
Hmm.
This one has more of it. And when Lop accepts it, she tries to go back to her sister, or she was told to stay put. Her father was going to go do something. And if you look at the house and everything, the way that everything is, it's It's full on traditional Japanese
It
style.
is. And good
And the
job on that,
animation
by
for
the way.
everything, all traditional, all stuff that's been done before, and it looks beautiful. It's extremely
Yes.
well detailed. Everything about it is fully detailed, as compared to some of the other styles that take the more comedy approach, where you get this more style in the main characters but less in the background.
Hmm.
Everything about this was highly detailed.
It was.
You get to the end, the father fights the daughter, then the father loses. He loses his good eye. But Lop, even with all this, still tries to appeal to her sister to stop. And when her droid that took a picture of them long ago gets struck down by her, that's when it sparked in her that she can't be reasoned with, and it sparked that connection to the Force long enough and strong enough for her to figure certain things out and to defend herself against her sister, and to
Right.
and to basically put an end to that conflict right there, which unfortunately did not end. Her sister survived, but
Yeah.
she has joined the Empire, whereas Lop and her father will join the rebellion.
Yes. Now, there is one thing, though, still that I do have a major grievance with about this episode. I've learned the story itself, as I've said, I don't like it, but I respect it. But there is one major grievance I still have with this episode, and that is that I believe that this episode suffers the worst from its time restraints. Because part of what pissed me off so much about this episode and seeing Ocho's transformation into what she becomes, it felt like no time had passed. But I'm sure that time did pass, they just didn't show it well. And I'm sure had they had another at least 20 minutes or so, they maybe could have shown where she comes from where she's saying, I get it, I still love dad, but I have to do this, to where she's actually trying to kill him. Like maybe show her go through some indoctrination scenes where she's like, where they're like, forget everyone you know. The empire is all that matters in your life now. You have to disassociate everyone that you know. They no longer matter. If we had seen some of that, I could maybe stomach this transformation of hers a little bit better, but they didn't.
Yeah, the time constraint on this, and more or less just accepting things as presented without further explanation. It is required on this one, and yeah, had they been able to make this into a standard 1 hour show, or 45 minutes, they could have added
Mhm.
more to what was it that started her down this path. What is it that the Empire was offering that was so appealing that she felt like she had no choice but to go against her father's wishes, which that's not a in that culture, that's a very uncouth thing to do. It doesn't
Oh yeah,
happen very often. So to see it
right.
happen, it's very powerful symbolically. And in this case, it has dire consequences for them all.
It
The
does.
dissolution of, not necessarily the dissolution of the family, but having that prodigal child go off and do their own thing, and having someone who was not of blood but is part of the family, is accepted as family, and eventually takes over as the head of the family.
Yes.
So yeah, this one as a Star Wars story, not all stories end in sunshine and rainbows. Just like we
Hmm.
knew that with Revenge of the Sith, it wasn't going to end well. We knew that,
Yeah.
and with this one, it doesn't have that happy ending that we would like. But if it was expanded upon, or if another episode of it's ordered, who knows what the conclusion to it might be. So for Star Wars, yeah, set between before the Battle of Yavin and after the reign of the Empire, about 10 years in, I'm going to give it a 4. Then on the anime side, it's a solid 4.
So for me, this is a hard one because, as I've said before, I don't like this story, but I respect it because it's probably the most realistic story they could tell. So I'm going to give it a 4 also. and this is the last thing, by the way, I'm going to say about this episode. I think it's, to use your own words, because we've talked about this before, it's a very poignant episode in regards to today's social
Yes.
and political climate.
Yes, it is.
So with that, we're going to go ahead and end this episode. So thank you guys for watching this. Make sure to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. And remember also to subscribe to Golgo 13's Anime 101. And just remember, guys, the Force is family.
The Force is family.
Yes.